I'm Melanie Johnson along with my co-host Jen Foster. We are both 13-time best-selling authors. We've published over 2,500 books and made all of our authors #1 bestsellers. We own Elite Online Publishing. If you want to become a best-selling author, look us up at eliteonlinepublishing.com. Now, welcome to the podcast that shares secrets from top industry experts that show you how to get lasting success and results. This is the Elite Expert Insider Podcast. Hi, everyone. It's Melanie Johnson and Jen Foster again to bring you a wonderful podcast. Hey, Jen, how are you doing?
Doing great. It's a beautiful day outside and inside.
And inside. That's right. You got to make every day a great day. So we are going to be talking about leaving a legacy. And some of you may know I did a TED Talk on leaving a legacy. So it's really a passionate thing about mine and Jen's as well, that, leaving your memories and leaving something behind for the next generations to come. So remember, you are worth being remembered. And we have a specialist here that's going to talk about how to leave a legacy. And, so many people, entrepreneurs, successful people, or even if you think you have a regular everyday life, well, your life is exceptional in so many different ways. You've gone through things that other people maybe haven't gone through or are going through, and advice you have can leave a legacy for them to have it easier. So today we're going to have Sam Knickerbocker, and he's going to talk about the mindsets, behaviors that are necessary to create that meaningful legacy. And then, of course, we'd love to publish that legacy and that story for you to share it with thousands and millions of other people. Hey, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Melanie and Jen, and I'm excited to be here. As I didn't know that you had given a TED Talk on this. That's a goal of mine at some point, to give a TED Talk, but I love speaking everywhere that I can, and just sharing this mission of how to really, from my perspective, achieve true fulfillment, and not really achieve it from a long-term perspective, but on a daily area of fulfillment.
Awesome. Well, Samuel, tell us a little bit how you got into this and how you became the expert and are speaking around the country about leaving a legacy.
So, great question. So I'm the 7th of 11 children, and big family here in Utah, and was raised, in the process of being raised, because of how many children there were. My parents were Pizza Hut drivers. So you can imagine the amount of financial and emotional stress that was on there. My mom was either pregnant or breastfeeding for, I think, a total of 18 to 20 years, somewhere around there, just straight through. Yeah. I mean, it's just a long time, right? And so she was mentally unstable at the time. And so there led to a lot of abuse and neglect and things in the household. So growing up, not only was I experiencing poverty, I had my parents were doing their best to teach us about success. So they would have us read Cash Flow Quadrant or play Cash Flow, the board game. They'd have us read Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins, these other successful people. But what I found was that I was being modeled poverty. I didn't come to this realization until much later in life, but it doesn't matter what you say to somebody. What actually happens is really speaking louder than what you say. And I think that that's such an important aspect when it comes to legacy. So when I grew up, I started working full time at age 11 in a honey extracting plant. Was homeschooled, so our whole family was homeschooled. So fun, lots of fun there. I eventually went to school to figure out, why does somebody get abused? Like, what is it that causes this to happen, and why does somebody choose to abuse another person? And what I found, so I went into psychology at first, and that led me to neuropsychology, which led me to chemistry, because the neuropsychology is basically how's the brain structured, and the impact is the chemical impact. Then I went into sociology, and I was like, okay, so who has the most of these social issues? And it came down to socioeconomic status. And so I kind of shifted my whole focus into really focusing on, how do we help somebody understand where to get the time and resources to live the life that they actually want. And so that's how I got into the legacy world. And over time, it became more focused on healing people, right? I'm still very much the psychologist in my mind. I want to work through why somebody's doing what they're doing and why they're choosing those things. And that's really where my foundational belief system about legacy and living more intentionally was kind of born. It didn't really hit home how crucial, or I don't even know if crucial is the right word, how much I was living my best life, and I wasn't sharing that with the people closest to me, until my wife and I was speaking at a retreat out in Florida, And my wife and I were there, and one of the other speakers, she said, okay, write down everything that fulfills you in life for 20 minutes. So all we did was wrote down for 20 minutes, pen didn't leave the page, everything that fulfills us. And so after 20 minutes, I'm sitting right next to my wife, who I love more than this earth, right? And I've got 2 full pages of all the stuff that fulfills me. And then my wife, she's got like 4 or 5 things. And I was like, oh, this doesn't make me feel good, right? Why is this the case? And there's a balancing act, but essentially I was living in fulfillment. Most of the stuff on those 2 pages, I was doing either daily, weekly, at the very least monthly. I think the only 2 or 3 things on there that I was only doing annually. But most of the stuff I was like experiencing this regularly, where my wife, she's taking care of our young sons, age 3 and 2, and she was just not having the same experience as I was. And so that's when I was like, okay, we need to find a way to really help everybody go through this process of understanding, one, how do they want to be remembered? Because you're going to be remembered the way you live, not the way you tell people you want to be remembered. And no disrespect for writing books, because I love writing books, but you could write a wonderful book about yourself and live a different way. And people remember how you lived, not the book that you wrote. So,
so true. And I think that's so true in parenting, especially. You tell your kids to clean up after themselves, but your room is a disaster. I mean, just a simple thing. You don't clean up the kitchen, but you're telling them, you got to pick up your clothes, you got to clean up your room, and your room is terrible. Well, why should they do that? Because you're setting that example. And I use drinking as an example too. You tell your young teenagers, don't drink and drive, but all their life you've been going out to dinner and drinking and then putting them in the back of your car and driving them home. And you've had 3 beers or whatever. And then you're trying to tell them that it's all about modeling the behavior. Behavior is so much stronger than words. Totally get that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so because of that, it was always really hard for me to write any books. I have one book that Jen actually inspired me to. I was at a conference where she was speaking at, and I always wanted to be some type of author, but I just didn't know how to get started. And she's like, look, it's really easy. You find 10 topics, you talk about them on a video, you transcribe the video, and you put it in a book. And you flower it up a little bit. You do a little bit more work than that, but that's how you get started. And I was like, I think I can do that. I think I can make that one work. And so that's what I did. That was my first book, Fuel Your Legacy, 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. And you can get that on my website. But what I liked about that book was, and all of my books and journals, and one of the reasons I struggled writing, and you guys are probably better at writing than I am, and so you probably don't have this same struggle, but I've read a lot of books, and I don't love just reading information or good ideas. The best thing that I want to do is I want good questions so that I can go on the journey myself, not read about somebody else's journey necessarily. And I didn't know how to write my own journey in a way that somebody feels like they are the one going on the journey. So that was my problem. You guys may not have that problem. Maybe you're better at writing than I am, but so I've chosen, a lot of my books are actually journals to help process through this journey. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to share what this structure looks like of how I help somebody go through this process. So,
awesome. And those who don't have, they're not watching on YouTube, that are listening, then he'll describe kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. So imagine you're in Greece or in Italy somewhere, and you're looking at some of these older buildings, or the Washington, the Lincoln Memorial Building. Okay, so imagine that's what you're looking at. What's the foundation? The very basic of it is, how do you want? This is how I define legacy, right? How do I want to be remembered in 6 generations from now? That's anywhere from 100 to 150 years from now. If you're thinking, well, who do I remember from 6 generations ago?
Yeah.
Mother Teresa, Gandhi, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Lincoln, like people who made a massive impact, people that we'll always remember, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, like these people, they will, because of the impact that they've had, they didn't dream just small enough. They thought, hey, I'm going to go have a major impact on the world. So what would you want to be remembered for? Even if it's just in your family, what do you want to be remembered for? So when you start with that intention, it clarifies what's really important. And so everything has to go through that. And then next is, what are your core values? What is actually important to you? Now, this was another funny thing about that same retreat. So we analyzed our core values, and so many people, because it's the thing to do, they'll put family on there, they'll put friends, they'll put whatever. But when it comes down to it, when you track how they spend their money, how they spend their time, those are not core values of theirs. Like, it's just not. So learning to be honest with yourself is a huge part of building an actual legacy. And that goes back to the authenticity of like how you're living and what you write about yourself are too. If they can be in alignment, you have a much better chance of it actually following through. So core values, and then fulfillment, what actually fulfills you. And I've defined fulfillment in one of three, potentially four ways, right? So this morning, I had the opportunity to be on a call from somebody that I really respect, a mentor that's worth, and not that money's the complete indicator, but he's in my same industry. And in 25 years, he went from being 24 and nothing to now he's worth $100 million, right? Mm-hmm. So when did this call start? 6 a.m. Okay. So another mentor told me about the call last night. Well, all through the night, I couldn't sleep. I woke up at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock because I was so excited about what was going to happen. Okay. It's like the night before Disneyland or the night before Christmas, that type of excitement. When was the last time you really had that type of excitement in your life? Yeah. Right. When was the last time you had butterflies because you were like the same type of butterflies before you kissed your first person or you held their hand, or like, when was the last time you had these type of butterflies? When was the last time you cried out of just pure joy and love for like your children or the experience? It's just so fulfilling. You can't hold back tears even if you wanted to, you know? Or when was the last time that you shouted uncontrollably, like you heard something, it was instantly so exciting that you just exclamation of joy, you just couldn't hold it in. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I just yelled in this room where nobody else is yelling, but I'm just so happy, right? So that's the type of fulfillment that I'm talking about. Not like, oh yeah, it's nice, it's joyful. No, like what really gets you going? Fulfillment. And then once you understand that, how does that apply to your faith, your family, your fitness, your finance, and your fun? Because those are, I think, the pillars of your life. Everything you do on a daily basis, from my perspective, fits into one of those 5 areas. Mm-hmm. And then the capstone of this building, right? So those are the pillars. The capstone is your results. And I think of results, although in the building it's structured differently, I think of it a lot like sun rays, right? And every ray of sun is really an individual that you're impacting. Mm-hmm. Right? So then this is a litmus test. If I went to the 5 of your closest friends or the people that you spend the most time around, if I asked them what your goals were for faith, family, fitness, finance, and fun, are you living in alignment? Would they be able to tell what those goals are based on how you're living your life? Or would they tell me something random? If I ask them what fulfills you, would they tell me something random, or would they actually be able to tell me what lights you on fire? Core values. Do your closest confidants know what actually is your core value or not? And more importantly, do the 5 closest people say what you want them to say about how you're going to be remembered? Or do they remember you completely different? Because if they don't even have it in alignment, good luck getting the world to believe it. You know, like if your 5 closest friends aren't on board, then the world's not on board. And so that's kind of the legacy building. And so all of the journals, I have a fulfillment journal that starts out by 3 things you're grateful for. What are your 3 goals? And then actually intentionally, so we have you do the journal exercise of like, what fulfills you in each of these faith, family, fitness, finance, fun areas for 30 minutes, the beginning of the month. And then you take one of those things and you schedule it into every day. And then you write out, and you guys know the power of actually writing even versus typing. You write out, how are you pre-write out the experience of fulfillment in the morning. And then at nighttime, you journal about, well, how did you experience fulfillment that day? And then in the future, next time you have that experience, what are you going to do to make it even more fulfilling? Right? So you're programming your brain to see and experience fulfillment multiple times during the day is the objective of that journal. Yeah. Then the other journal.
That would be so impactful.
Yeah.
Just the writing part alone.
Yeah, it's huge. So then the other journal is, some people get caught up in like traumatic experiences, which I get. So how do we process through trauma and turn it into a positive? How do we turn it into a fulfilling experience? Even, and this, I use somewhat, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, but I use somewhat crass examples here, but just because I've dealt with people, like a lot of my clients, we've been able to have these transformations. So like even some of my clients who have been violently sexually abused or had physical harm done to them as children or adults, right? Even some of these worst experiences that you can imagine, being able to turn that from a negative experience into a very positive, fulfilling, good memory because of what it means for you and who you've become, that helps an individual make peace with themselves and be able to move past the past and move forward into the future. And so that goes over what are the facts of the situation, removing all emotion, right?
Mhm.
And as writers, you can think, okay, if I wrote this with 0 emotional words, what would that look like? It'd be a really boring book. Okay. That's the goal. Your experiences are really boring when there's no emotional attachment to them. And then you write, how do you feel? And then the next question, I think the most transformational, is what might also be true. So what's the third party position, or in videos, the fourth wall, right? What's the outside perspective of what actually happened? And then the last thing again is, why are you grateful and what did you learn from it? Like how is this going to be a positive? How are you going to choose for this to be a positive experience in your life? And what with all of that combined into this process of building a legacy, it makes it a lot easier to then come to people like Jen and Melanie and say, okay, here's my stories. I want to write an inspiring book that's going to lead people to greatness, not just this pity party for myself, right? Because they're two different, you could write the same story two very different ways and have two different outcomes. So I'm not the expert in writing, so I'm not going to pretend to be, but that's the objective of helping somebody create a legacy and process properly through it, so that then we can take it to Jen and Melanie or a digital marketing place and get that message out there, put it into a screenwrite and create a movie about your experience that's going to leave somebody better off than you found them.
Well, what I love about that too, it's about living a legacy. You're teaching people how to live a legacy. I mean, all the things that you talked about, those core values of fulfillment, most of us, I would say the majority of the population, don't take the time to define what those actually are. And sometimes it's really difficult. Like you say, well, gosh, I've never, I mean, I think I live by values, be honest and be faithful and things like that. But you're like, but have I ever written it down? Have I ever really defined who I want to be? Have I ever defined what really fulfills me? What really makes me jump for joy and scream out and get those butterflies? And how can I experience to have those butterflies every day to work that into my schedule? And as you talked about your wife, she had less of those things because maybe more so moms than dads, we get so wrapped up in being the giver and taking care of people. I'm going through a time right now where I'm being the caregiver for my mom who had a stroke, and I keep forgetting about myself. And everyone's saying, "Hey, remember to take time for yourself." And you're like, "Oh, it's okay, it's okay." And you don't get fulfilled, and you don't realize that it stacks up. If you don't get fulfillment for a matter of days, weeks, months, then you tend to start to feel empty inside, and you forget what really fulfills you. And that's happening during this COVID time, where so many of us are not being social. We're not going out. We're being locked in our homes, not having interaction, not doing our normal routine, that you start to forget what fulfills you. And really building that into your schedule, I think, is huge. And I love the question. You said, okay, I'm going to do this to be fulfilled today. What can I do to be even more fulfilled tomorrow? That's huge, I think. I've never asked myself that. I love all that, Samuel.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you love it.
Well, and I mean, moms and dads and anyone, even if you don't have kids, I think it is kind of not the norm to stop and ask yourself those questions. It's not the norm to write down in your journal what fulfills you. It's not normal to say, wait, am I being fulfilled today? Like, that's not something that we talk about on a regular basis, right? Like you just go through your day, you work, you come home, you watch Netflix, and then you go to bed, right? Or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, I do watch Netflix because I love watching TV.
Me too. But you don't think about, well, what really fulfills you? What do you really and what are those, faith, family, fitness, fun? Do you focus on those? Do you ask yourself, what do I like to do for fun? I think a lot of people get in their routine and they forget that part, or they forget, about faith, or they forget about different parts of those pillars, right? They don't focus on them because they're too wrapped up in the day to day.
Mhm.
And I think
Absolutely.
we've got to ask those same questions in every portion of our life. Like you said, the pillars, like how do I find fulfillment, fun, and what are my core values in business or at my job? Like, you're like, oh, I'm going to work again. It's the same old, same old. Well, what can you find that's really fulfilling in your job on a daily basis or a regular basis that you can give butterflies and get excited about in all of those categories? And I used to say, and I tell my kids this, I use those same pillars at faith, family, fun, fitness, and I said, you can, and then on the fun category, I say, now you can have as much fun as you want, but if it negatively impacts any of those other pillars, then that's you're saying say no. Like if you can't get up and go to work the next day because you had too much fun the night before, and it screws up being there for your family, or it's going to negatively impact your finances, your job, or disconnect you from your faith, your core values, then that's not the fun for you. That's how you decide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the main structures here, because with both journals, again, I want people to be creating. I want to help people get into the creative space themselves rather than me creating for them and telling them how they want to create. And so one of the nice things about these journals is especially the identify your identity, each story, I ask you to title the experience. So what's cool about that is you can have different angles, right? The emotionless angle, the all emotion angle, the what could also be true, the third party angle, and then what gave you gratitude. And that ultimately, I mean, hardbound, it's ultimately something you could either take to Jen and Melanie and say, here's a book of my life and the most impactful experiences, right? Ghost write a story for me, or do something, or just bind it and pass it on to your kids. Like, these are the experiences I went through. These are the hard experiences, the happy experiences, the funny experiences, right? Because it works with everything. It doesn't have to be only negative, traumatic experiences. So that's one thing. But what's really crucial, and you guys would know this as writers, a feeling is so undefined. You can be like, oh, I think this is how I feel. But then like you write down, you start actually writing into a language how you feel. And then you go read it and you're like, ugh, that didn't describe my feeling at all, right? I got to rewrite that because that's just not specific enough. And that's what's so crucial about writing things down. We can have all of these feelings of love and excitement or anger and animosity and all this stuff. Oh, I want to kill my mom. I want to kill this person, whatever. They cut me off on the freeway, right? But when the moment you write that down and you read that back, you're like, I don't actually hate that person. I don't actually feel that way. Humans by nature, it's my core belief, and whether it's true or not, it works for me, is that humans by nature are compassionate individuals. They want love and attention and connection more than they want disconnection.
Mm-hmm.
And when they are confronted by vile things that they think, because we all think them, at least I don't know anybody who doesn't. If you don't, you're a saint. But for me, I think them. When you write them down and you read that back to yourself, you're like, ooh, that doesn't actually align. Those thoughts don't align with my core values. I had this experience with
Is that
one
who
of my
you really want to
mentors.
be? You're like, is that who I want to be? Is this who I am?
Really, I had this experience with one of my mentors. I was not happy because of my lack of ability. I was uncoachable at the time, and they were out of town, and I was just, I blew my lid. I was saying nasty things about them all over town, just like, I just don't like this person, right? And I caught myself. I will never forget where I was driving at the time when I said something, and I was like, "Ugh, that is not how Samuel thinks. Like, that's just whoever this is right now, whoever I'm being is not who Samuel Knickerbocker is. It doesn't align with who I am, my core values, my principles of love, like nothing." And so as soon as that person came back, I called them early in the morning. It was like 6 a.m. Another night I couldn't sleep. Sunday, they were going to church with their family. I was like, no, I need to meet with you before church. I got to come over. And I went and I just confronted him, basically. I don't know if that's the right word, but went and said, hey, look, this is what I've said about you over the last 2 weeks. I'm sorry. It has nothing to do with you. The truth is, it all has to do with me and my past experiences and the way I perceive life. And I'm sorry that I've hurt you in this way. That being said, certain forms of communication, it's really hard for me to process. I'd appreciate if in the future you communicated to me this other way. Because the thing about love is you can't get mad at somebody for not loving you properly if you never have even told them how you feel the most love. And so often we get in that way. So I think that journaling can help that process. and really analyzing, okay, do I really feel this way? Or is this just, is this a feeling or is this a truth? And separating those things are crucial, I think, for building a legacy. Because again, you're going to be remembered how you act and how you live your life, not how you write about you living your life.
Yeah. Or talk about your life, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
good.
I love all that. Thank you, Samuel, so much for coming on the show and explaining all these pillars and the way that you can leave a legacy. And where can people go to find more about you and to get your journals?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The journals are they're in the process of getting published on Amazon and on Lulu. I'm pretty sure they're still on Lulu. If you've ever gone there, I don't know where to get them hardback better. So
We'll talk after.
Yeah, we'll talk after. But yeah, so Lulu, and you can Google them. And then really Instagram is a great place to get a hold of me, just sam.knickerbocker. Knickerbocker is spelled KNICKERBOCKER. So sam.knickerbocker. You can also, if you want a free copy of the first book I wrote, then you can go to my website, samknickerbocker.com, and download a copy there. And then I have a podcast called Fuel Your Legacy, and it's interviewing people from all walks of life and the legacy that they are building, and finding out what are their habits, mindsets, and behaviors that they use, and how can we adopt those into our lives. And then this new thing called Clubhouse. I don't know if you guys are on Clubhouse yet, but if you are, let's connect. I'm on there as well. So that's a whole new world that is very exciting right now. It's extremely distracting. I have to put time limits or I get distracted for hours. So but yeah, I'm pretty much anywhere. You can Google me, you'll find me.
Awesome.
I'm not the Baptist preacher, so.
Awesome. We'll put your links up on the bottom of the YouTube video as well in our show notes on our website and in the podcast, your favorite podcast. You'll see him in the show notes, so you can check that out and click on his link to his website and get that PDF.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for joining us today. That was great. I have several people I want to listen to this podcast already on my list that could use this and will be inspired by it. So I hope you'll be sharing it too. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Leave us comments and share it with all your friends, anyone that you think would be helpful. I think there was tons of great information. I had a bunch of notes in here. So we'll see you next time. Remember to stay positive and write a book and write your legacy. Make sure it's you're living it, not just saying it. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.